Aokigahara Forest, also known as the Suicide Forest, is located on the northwest side of Mount Fuji in Japan, near the border of Yamanashi and Shizuoka prefectures. It is famous for its dense trees and eerie silence, and has become notorious as a place where many people have chosen to end their lives. Some say it is the silence and loneliness of the forest, combined with an oppressive atmosphere that fills the heart with hopelessness. Today I want to tell you a story about Aokigahara, based on the memory of a woman named Michiko, who experienced something terrifying there. She is one of the few lucky ones who made it out alive. It was 2018. Michiko was already a middle-aged woman, and her husband Ryuji had mysteriously disappeared in Aokigahara a few years earlier. The police found Ryuji's shoes at the edge of the forest, along with a simple note, and concluded that he had taken his own life. They quickly closed the case, labeling it as suspected suicide. But do you think Michiko believed that? She didn't. Deep in her heart, she knew it couldn't be that simple. Ryuji was the strongest person she knew, full of love for life. How could he just end it all? So for years, Michiko never gave up. She always felt that something was not right. And then, something strange happened. Over the years since Ryuji's disappearance, Michiko began to receive letters written in Ryuji's handwriting. The letters mentioned places they had visited together and contained details only the two of them knew. The messages seemed desperate, like someone pleading, "Find me, don't give up on me." These letters kept Michiko up at night, and there was only one question echoing in her mind. "Ryuji, where are you?" Finally, one night, as she sat with those letters in her hands, Michiko made up her mind. She would go to Aokigahara herself to find out the truth. The next morning, she packed her things, Ryuji's old photos, his favorite coat, and all the letters, and set out on her journey to the forest. On her way to Aokigahara, Michiko met an elderly guide. When the old man saw her heading toward the forest alone, he frowned and warned her, "Miss, that place is not for the living. It doesn't belong to us." He then told her an old story, how the forest was once a place where poor families abandoned their elderly. These abandoned souls, he said, died full of resentment and became restless spirits, forever wandering among the trees. But did Michiko listen? No, she didn't care about the old stories. All she cared about was finding Ryuji. The very mention of Aokigahara sends chills down the spine. The moment Michiko stepped into the dense forest, she felt a strange pressure bearing down on her. The trees were so thick that barely any sunlight made it through, and the ground was covered in thick layers of fallen leaves. Every step she took made a crunching sound, as if someone was whispering right by her ear. Michiko held Ryuji's photo tightly in her hand and followed what she imagined could be his path. The silence around her was unnerving. The only sound was the wind rustling through the branches, as if something invisible was following her, silently observing. The further she went, the more she felt that something was terribly wrong, like countless eyes were watching her from the darkness. After walking for a while, Michiko suddenly found a worn-out outdoor jacket. It was Ryuji's, the very one he had been wearing when he disappeared. Her heart clenched painfully, and tears immediately welled up in her eyes. She was right. Ryuji had been here. But what did that mean? Was he trapped? Taken by something? As night began to fall, the temperature in the forest dropped quickly. Michiko wrapped herself tighter in her coat, but the bone-chilling cold refused to leave her. She pulled out her phone, wanting to call for help, but the screen showed no signal. At that moment, she heard a low voice, a sound coming from all directions at once, as if someone was whispering right in her ear. "Find me. Don't give up on me." It was Ryuji. Michiko's heart skipped a beat, and she quickly looked around, but all she saw were the dark shapes of the trees, nothing else. Suddenly, a sharp, eerie laugh echoed from deep within the forest. Michiko felt her scalp tingle, and she couldn't help but quicken her pace. But that laughter seemed to follow her, each echo making her heart beat faster. She told herself not to be afraid, but her legs wouldn't listen. They began to tremble uncontrollably. The rustling of the leaves under her feet sounded like countless ghosts whispering secrets she wasn't meant to hear. Just as she was on the brink of panic, Michiko's foot slipped, and she fell heavily to the ground, tumbling into a deep pit. The pit was filled with the stench of rot. Her hand brushed against something cold and slimy. When she looked down, she saw it was a gnawed, disfigured hand bone. Michiko screamed and struggled to climb out, but as she tried to pull herself up, an icy hand seemed to grab her ankle from behind, dragging her down. With all her strength, Michiko managed to break free and scramble out of the pit. Her hands were covered in dirt and blood, her heart pounding wildly in her chest, and her legs were weak with fear. And then she heard the whispering again, clearer this time, as if the voices were right next to her ear. "Stay, you belong here." Michiko felt like she was about to lose her mind. Horrifying images flashed through her head. Abandoned souls wandering the forest, dark shadows lurking in the silence, all waiting for her to give up hope and join them. Her vision began to blur, her breathing grew rapid, and the entire world seemed to be collapsing around her. The darkness was swallowing her, but then, suddenly, a beam of light broke through from afar, dim but very real. Michiko snapped back to reality and ran toward the light with all her strength. She didn't know how long she ran. Time and space seemed to lose all meaning. The only thing that mattered was that light. She stumbled through thorns and branches, and finally, as the first light of dawn broke across the sky, she burst out of the forest. Standing at the edge of the woods, Michiko looked back. The dark forest stood silently, as if nothing had happened. But Michiko knew. She knew that the forest held countless secrets and restless souls, watching her quietly from the shadows, whispering softly, "You will be back." Back at home, Michiko thought she would finally be safe, but the feeling of being watched never left her. Her dreams were always filled with that dark forest, those twisted shadows, those cold whispers, and Ryuji's pleading voice, "Find me." One day, while sorting through her husband's belongings, Michiko found an old photo. On the back were the words, "Find me." She froze. The handwriting was exactly the same as the letters she had received. In that instant, a chill crept up her spine, as if some unknown malevolent force was silently approaching, waiting for her to return.